Main program for the evening, Lorah. Would you step forward?
It's too hot.
Yeah, you're working now. All right, then how far you can go.
Okay. Okay. All right. Can everybody hear me? Before I start, I want to read this poem that a friend of mine sent me from Maryland. Do you have moments in your life when you have time to spare, idle moments that go to waste like vapor in the air? Do you have time to throw away as your life stood still, or do you use it for God and try to do His will? Do you have minutes in your life without some thought or scheme, idle moments going by, waste on a dream? When you have time on your hands and now not what to do, bow your head and say a prayer and let the sun shine through. So if you have moments such as these, do not think it's odd, for none of them are really wasted if you think of God. My name is Lorah, and I was born in Blandon, Pennsylvania, with a population of 500. It's 8 miles north of Reading, and I enlisted in the Navy in 1942, called for active duty January 43, took basic training at Bainbridge, Maryland, not far from the Susquehanna River, then on to Norfolk for gunnery school, which landed me in the Armed Guard and on the Liberty ship, the John Sullivan. 1 year, then on to the amphibious force in February 43 aboard the USS LST 283. What is this? I still wonder. Landing ship tank, also other names, large slow target and large snapping turtles. Only 328 foot long and 50 foot wide. There was over 1,000 LSTs built. The British used a similar type LST in the evacuation of Dunkirk. To meet the conflicting requirements of deep draft for ocean travel and shallow draft for beaching operations, the ship was designed with large ballast system that could be filled for ocean passage and pumped out for beach operations. It took months to build the LST. By the end of the war, it was also down to 2 months. LST took part in the invasions of Solomon Islands and other islands in the Pacific. Campaigns also in Sicily, Italy, Normandy, and southern France, where LST got 2 battle stars. LST-43 was built here in Philadelphia. LST-282 and 283 were built in Pittsburgh in the fall of '43. After LST was launched, they left Pittsburgh down the Ohio and Mississippi River to New Orleans, where a small boat called an LCT was put on the main deck to go to England. Also the armament, which consisted of 2 40 millimeters and 10 20 millimeters guns, picked up convoy in the Gulf and headed for Boston, where we picked up 35 Navy medics and 4 doctors. Also pontoons of various sizes and canned fruits and vegetables. And then on to Halifax, Nova Scotia, where we picked up a convoy for England. Took about 16 days to get to England. Some of the men got sick. There was one fella, he was from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and he weighed about 225. He was in the sack for 16 straight days with a bucket. He was sick. When he got to England, he weighed approximately 160 pounds. He was really sick. We landed in Plymouth, England, where we unloaded our cargo and began training with divisions of LSTs, continued on training exercises up and down the coast of England. But time was approaching for D-Day, so finally big maneuvers were ahead. Our division brought up the rear of the convoy in the Tiger operation. Not many people knew about the Tiger operation. And what happened was the German U-boats slipped in at nighttime and sunk several LSTs. But nobody knew about it until after the war. From then on, everybody was topside. This was kept a secret long after the war was over. After several Japanese invasions, the day came around 6 o'clock in the evening. On June the 5th, several Army officers and men come aboard and put American flags and stickers on all the vehicles, and a Marine Guard was placed at Captain Perry's quarters. Around 11 o'clock at night, June the 5th, we sailed from Dartmouth Harbor and headed for Utah Beach. It wasn't long before we could see the flashes of gunfire and what a sight at daybreak. Wherever you looked, there was some kind of ship and planes almost blackened the sky. We sailed between the battleship USS Texas and the shore, and we could see and hear 14-inch shells being lobbed into the beachhead. Again, 283 was lucky, not getting caught at the Tiger operation, and we were headed for the beach rather than Omaha Beach, where there was hell. We finally beached around noon. The beach was secure. When we beached, most of the LSTs, you come in full force and drop the rear anchor. This will help you to get off the beach when the tide comes in. As soon as the Army with its equipment got off the ship, the medics began to turn the ship into a floating hospital. Soon the casualties were brought aboard when we were fully loaded back to England and more supplies. This went on for about 6 weeks. One good thing come out of England was fish and chips. We found a place in Falmouth, and one of the fellas led us on the way, and there was, I think, that much light in the window where we could find them. But they were wrapped in newspapers, and we ate them regardless of what took place. Back again, again, LST was lucky. The invasion of southern France, where we were secured with hardly a casualty. After we left England, we headed for Bizerte, Tunis, and then on to Naples, Italy for the regrouping for the southern France invasion. While in Naples, we did get fresh vegetable supplies. Again, LST was lucky. The invasion of southern France, where we landed, was secured with hardly any casualties. LST 50 and ship 283 hit the beach, with 282 standing off, waiting in the rear. A German bomber with a radio control bomb guided the bomb onto 282. It was preparing to beach, and their hatches were open, and the troops in their tanks and trucks, the tank deck and the main deck topside. It was hell on earth when the bomb hit, and it caught fire. Men jumped overboard, some in flames, some with broken arms, legs. Captain Perry ordered the small boats to head for 282 to save those that could be saved. The doctors and the medical staff from LST 283 again did a hell of a job. With the casualties from 282, upon leaving the beachhead, was sailed for Corsica, where we made lots of trips from Corsica to the French coast. After a trip to France, we were assigned to carry Allied personnel from Corsica to Longshore, Italy. After several weeks, we were ordered to sail for Bizerte, and then on to Oran, North Africa, some minor repairs. LST 283 left the European theater with a good record. 10,000 troops had been carried, 2,155 vehicles carried, 600 casualties carried and cared for, and 2,000 prisoners of war delivered. In November, we left Oran, North Africa, with a convoy to Norfolk, Virginia. After unloading in Norfolk, we sailed for Brooklyn Navy Yard for overhaul of the ship to be ready for the trip to the Pacific. After my 30 days leave, I was assigned to a ship at Camp Bradford, the amphibious base in Norfolk, Virginia. I never did see the LST-283 again. After serving a short time after the war in January waters, LST-283 returned to Pearl Harbor and was decommissioned, June 1946. Struck from the Navy list, January 1947, she was sold in the Hawaii for conversion for merchant service. Again, she was purchased by the Peru Navy, December 1951, for service in the Peru Navy as LST-34. At the present, the United States LST Association in Greece is hoping to bring back LST-325 as USS LST Ship Memorial, hoping for July 2000 and have it at our National Convention site, Buffalo, New York, August the 30th to September the 4th. I want to thank you. And Bill Leffler, you probably could enlighten us on the Pacific campaign.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me stick this on you.
Sure.
And stick close to this, and you got both of them.
My name is Bill Leffler. I served aboard LST-283 with Ray Lorah. Now, Ray and I spent that whole year in Europe, through Normandy and southern France. We hadn't seen each other until about 5 years ago. He left the ship in December, or actually January 1945. About 5 years ago, my wife and I exercised at the Holy Redeemer Hospital. So we're there on the life cycles, and I'm looking over and I see this fellow talking, waving his hands. I know this fellow from somewhere. Now, I didn't recognize him. There was something about him that I remembered. It just clicked in my head. I said to my wife, I know this fellow from somewhere. Finally, the curiosity got the best of me. I went over and I said, I know you from somewhere. Did you work here? Did you work there? Nope. I said, were you in the Navy? Yep. I said, were you in the amphibs? Yep. Were you on an LST? Yep. The 283. If he'd said no, I would have had a heart attack. So we've been together ever since. We both belong to the LST Association. We belong to the Armed Guard. Both of us didn't serve together, but we were in the Armed Guard. Now, after coming off of a Liberty ship, we were gunners, and I was a gunner on a Liberty ship, and that's quite a big ship. I was transferred to Boston. They told me I was going to join the fleet. Well, you know, I saw visions of a battleship or cruiser or aircraft carrier. They marched 20 of us down to the dock in Boston. And here's LST-283 sitting there. I nudged the fellow next to me, and I said, you know what? No more overseas duty for us. This is a coastal ship. Well, I was right. We hit the coast of Canada, the coast of Ireland, the coast of England, France, Italy, Africa, and all through the Pacific. Spent 2 years on that ship. So anyhow, after Ray left the ship was in the Brooklyn Navy Yard being refitted for the Pacific. And they took all of our 40mm guns off and put dual twin 40s on. And we all had to go get training. We had director control on these. We're really a modern ship now. They put an evaporator on it to make fresh water for us. We knew then we were going to the Pacific. Well, when we left, the rumors started, the scuttlebutt got around that we were going to the Pacific and we were getting ready for Okinawa. Well, we left New York, went to Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, waiting for orders to go through the Panama Canal. And that was really an experience going through the canal. So again, we knew we were heading for the Pacific. So a couple of us decided we're going to get a hair shaved, all the hair shaved off, because we weren't going to be in civilization for quite a few months. Anyhow, we got through the other side of the canal. The orders were changed to go to San Francisco. Well, we came into San Francisco. As we were approaching the Golden Gate, a destroyer came out, had his guns trained on us. We thought, what the heck's going on here? Well, evidently that's what they do, I guess, for their training. It didn't make us feel too easy. Anyhow, they brought orders out for us to go back into the Pacific and head for Seattle. So we headed up to Seattle. When we got into Seattle, we had liberty. Well, we got our uniforms on, we had our hats on, they came down to our ears. So we did everything to crumble the hat up so they wouldn't look too bad. Fortunately for us, after we left Seattle, the Bremerton shipyard, our ship hit a buoy on the way out. So fortunately for us, that meant we missed the Okinawa invasion. Went back into the harbor, and the shipyard was so busy they couldn't take us, put us in the dry dock to see if there's any damage. So they sent a couple divers down, and they said, well, you're safe enough, you can go into Pearl Harbor, you go into dry dock down there. So that's what we did. And while we're in the dry dock, we were such a small ship, they had to bring another ship in with us. It happened to be a submarine. And it was one of the old submarines before the snorkels came along. And we made friends with those fellows. They came aboard our ship, we went aboard the sub. And mind you, we're in dry dock, and I'm down in that submarine. I might as well have been down at the bottom of the ocean. And the claustrophobia for me was just fantastic. I couldn't even fit my shoulders through the hatches. I don't know how the fellows did it. So anyhow, from Pearl Harbor, we joined 2 other LSTs. And compared to what we spent the first year over in Europe, this was a cruise, a pleasure cruise. We became like furries. We went down to New Hebrides, crossed the equator, and brought equipment back up to Guam. Of course, going over the equator, we had to be indoctrinated into the Davy Jones locker. We were pollywogs, we became shellbacks. Well, I could tell you a whole story about that. One of my duties was to go up on the mast and notify them as soon as I saw the equator. I never did see it. But I'll tell you, that was a thrill, sitting on the mast. And the ship, thank goodness we were in calm water. If it was in rough water, I don't think I would have been able to do it. Because that ship was swaying back and forth, and you look down and all you see was water. So from there we went to Guam, made a couple trips to Saipan, and transferred equipment to the Philippines. From the Philippines we went to Okinawa, which now was taken, and we made several trips back and forth with equipment and waiting for the invasion of Japan, which fortunately never took place. While we were in Okinawa, we had warnings of a typhoon. And they ordered all the ships to get out of the harbor. Well, some of them decided they were going to stay, but we went out. Now, remind you, we're on an LST. You know, you've heard of a flat top. Well, this was a flat bottom. We got out to sea, and I guess we spent 3 or 4 days in this typhoon. Now, if any of you have seen the picture Cane Mutiny, you remember in the wheelhouse how they were trying to steer the ship through the typhoon. Well, they must have taken that from our ship because it was almost identical to what we saw. Well, I happened to be on the helm. And all you had to do was keep that ship headed toward the waves, because if you didn't, it would have been broached and that would have been the end of us. In that same typhoon, the cruiser Pittsburgh lost its bow. There were several destroyers that were sunk. We were very fortunate to come out of that. We came back into the port in Okinawa, and the ships that stayed there were all washed ashore. So anyhow, we went back to Saipan, and Tinian Island, we were in between. There was a little what would you call it, like a gulf in there, where all the ships went into anchor. Tinian Island is where the B-29s took off to bomb Japan. We used to go up to the radio shack and we'd hear the Armed Forces radio, radioing into the various cities in Japan, saying to clear out of the city, tomorrow we're going to pinpoint bomb your city. We would see these planes take off. This was phenomenal to watch. They had 2 runways. There would be 2 planes that came off at a time. Every 10 seconds, 2 more planes would come off. And there must have been 50 or 60 that took off at a time. And then at nighttime they'd come in. And of course it was dark. The first 5 planes, sets of 5 planes, would have their landing lights on. It looked like a highway in the sky. As soon as 2 would land, 2 more lights would go on. It was just phenomenal to watch. One day we heard a message to the people in Japan that we had a super bomb and to clear out of Nagasaki and what was the other one? Hiroshima. And sure enough, the next day we saw those planes take off. And again, saw them come in at night. But it was really an experience to go through. Of course, the war was over then, a couple days later. And we then went into Japan about a week later and picked up occupational troops. We took them up through the straits north of Japan. They had a squadron of minesweepers that was all mined to clear that for us. We came in from the Japanese Sea into the other side of Japan, landed on the beach, and their houses are right smack up on the beach. Now these people have never seen Americans. When we unloaded that ship, first of all, anybody that went ashore had to have a gun with them, because we didn't know what to expect. You didn't see anybody, but you could feel them looking at you. It was the strangest feeling. After 2 days, business went on as usual, and we were just accepted. So from there we went back, then we made a couple trips, and back to Guam, and there our skipper left the ship. And a lot of people, we had to go out by points. If you had enough points, you could be discharged, as a lot of you know. So I had enough points to go out, and I see these aircraft carriers coming out, loaded with thousands of men going home. They had the homeward bound pennant in red, white, and blue from the bow of the ship back to the stern. And I thought, oh boy, this is the way we're going to go home. Maybe 3-4 days instead of like a month on the LST. Well, it turned out they decided to send our LST back to Pearl Harbor. It was supposed to go in for the atomic bomb test. So anyhow, we put up our pennant and we headed back to Pearl. And in Pearl Harbor, we were discharged from there, a couple of us, and we were put on LCIs. Now, I don't know if you fellows, any of you fellows have seen an LCI. They're very small ships. Well, the squadron of us headed home. We're going to go into San Diego. Now, I guess there was 12 ships altogether. We had a Commodore with us. Well, they have 8 small diesel engines. At no time was more than one of these engines working. One engine and an auxiliary. So we kept falling back. So finally the Commodore said, okay, we're putting you at the head of the column. If you're there tomorrow, we'll be at the point of no return, and we'll take you home if we have to tow you. If not, you're going to go back to Pearl. Got up next morning for watch. There was not a ship in sight. They sent us back to Pearl. Well, you talk about someone here losing 40 or 50 pounds. I was sick every night on this thing. I went from like 180 to 160 pounds in 2 days. So finally, we did get back into Pearl, and they sent us home on an LSD, a landing ship dry dock. And from there, they sent us home to be discharged. So, Ray?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to let you, how do you put this in? I want to tell you about an experience I had, it happened, let me see. It happened September 1998. My boy was over in England and he had called me and he said, "Dad, pick me up at the airport." So I went down to the airport and they sent me to where the French planes come in. I shouldn't have been there in the first place. So I'm waiting around. After a while, some Frenchman taps me on the shoulder. I had this jacket. And he says, "I know where LST 282 is." What a coincidence. He was a scuba diver, and over in southern France, he was scuba diving and come across LST 282. And since then, we have been communicating and we're writing letters. But what an experience. If it wouldn't have been my boy going to England, I'd have never known about it. And he has sent me some different articles about where the LST 282 is. It was sunk with a radio control bomb in the invasion of southern France. I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we got a lot of good stories and we've got a little bit of time left here. So what other stories are there out in the audience that we might hear? Somebody think about it a little bit. Maybe we give you 5 minutes if you twist your arms here.
From England to Normandy, you put an entire tank company on one jet. And I was all the way in the back, and all the motors were running. We hit the beach, and the door went down halfway and stopped. Stopped. And I have a headache like I never had before in my life.
Did everybody in the back hear what he's having to say? I can't hear. You heard it okay. All right. He's got a good voice. So, any more about it?
No, they finally got it down, but it was, meanwhile, all the carbon monoxide building up inside the ship. They finally got it out.
Okay.
Here's another one I got to share with you. I'll be here all night long. If you people come across the LST 283, Bill Leffler, my shipmate, he wrote this. But him and I, we had been meeting with the Armed Guard, and we always wanted to know where Captain Perry is. Is he around? But we only knew him as J.R. Perry. We never knew him other than J.R. Perry. So Bill wrote this letter, and it went into the scuttlebutt, and I'm out in San Diego with my son, and I get a call one Christmas, and Captain Perry's in my son's backyard. Fantastic. That happened 1994, I think it was. Really great. I just wanted to share that with you. Oh yeah, Captain Perry read this letter, and he called Bill, and Bill then called me. Yeah.
And it was a message on our answering machine. And it said, "This is Commander J.R. Roderick Perry."
Yeah, Rodney Perry.
And he said, "No use for you to call me. I'll call you back later." I didn't know. First of all, I said to my wife, "Sure, somebody's kidding me." Shit. And so I didn't know where he lived. Still living. And sure enough, 2 days later, he called me. And he read the article.
He read this article that Bill wrote in our LST Association's newspaper called the Scuttlebutt.
First thing he said, "You were wrong."
But that?
First thing he said to me, "I read your article and you were wrong." That's the skipper. There was an article there when we landed in southern France. You remember 282 was supposed to go into the beach.
Right.
And we circled around in the Mediterranean waiting 82 got the order to go in, she was heading into the Mediterranean. We were heading into the beach. So the two skippers contacted each other and said, look, we'll go in your place. And that's what happened. I had it twisted in the article, and that's what the skipper told me.
Bill, that's why you and I are still here. We're lucky. God was really with us, believe me. But I just wanted to, and I still see the skipper every, usually once a year. I go out to California, and him and his wife, we go out to lunch, and it's really great.
Often discussed, and wonder what happened to our skipper. And so I thought, I'm going to call him. And I remember he's in California. So I called his brother-in-law, who gave me his son's phone number. So I called him, and he said, Merry Christmas. I said, that's going on way up there. We're wishing them Merry Christmas. I said, Ray, you wouldn't believe who I just talked to. I said, Captain Curry.
No. I could hardly sleep that night. I said, what's this guy look like? Yeah. Pardon?
I said, no, not only that, I said, he's only about 2 miles from where you are.
I know. Unbelievable.
Did you go to see him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we went to see him, and really great. Oh, another thing, too, it just come to my mind. While going across the Atlantic, I was going out at watch one night. And just as I opened the door, I looked down, and I says, what are these tin pans flying off the ship for? The next morning, I found out somebody got in the galley and stole 3 of Captain Perry's cherry pies, and ate them and threw the pans overboard. You should have hurt the cook. You should have hurt the baker. I'll never forget, just like it happened yesterday.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
You see what I mean about meeting the guys that you were with and remembering these things? And the two of them just reminded me I was in the same typhoon that they were in. But what happened there was an interesting story, as he says, that I want to share with you. When I was on the Chaffee, there were only 2 fellows from New York, myself from Brooklyn, and there was a fellow from the Bronx, and his name was Sal Amico. I still see him once in a while. And what happened was we were both electricians mates, and one of the jobs that we did, this was a steam turbo-electric generated ship. So it had 2 huge generators, and one was enough to run the entire ship. So what we did was every day, our job early in the morning was to parallel the 2 generators, shut down the one that was working the day before so we could service it and get the other one online. So this one day, it was raining like the devil outside. It was rough and so on, and I don't know why Sal was outside, but he came in and he was wringing wet, and I didn't notice that he was wet. And he forgot what he had learned at Purdue University, where they taught us how to be electricians mates, and he said, okay, Sparks, let's put these things together. And he's standing on the metal deck, and I'm holding my 2 controls, and he reaches up and takes those 2 controls, and he's frozen like that. And he's turning colors, and he's shaking like this, and I remembered what they said, never touch him. You got to tackle him. So I tackled him. He wasn't hurt, he was just shaking, he was scared as hell, but he was okay. And so we became inseparable. But what happened was, he was so seasick, like you guys told us, that he used to walk around with a toothbrush and toothpaste in his breast pocket. And every 2 minutes he was throwing up and brushing his teeth. And the chief electrician's mate said to him, you know what you got to do? You got to drink black coffee. That will make, and we were only kids. We drank black coffee, made us sicker. So anyway, the doctor one day said, you got to put this kid ashore. He's going to die. You know, he was like, if he stood sideways, you didn't see him. So So they put him ashore. We had a tearful goodbye. We said, if the war is over and we both survive, we'll look for each other. Okay. So then about 6 or 9 months later, there we are in Okinawa. The same typhoon. But just before the typhoon, and you remember, fellas, how the typhoons were. It was gorgeous 1 second, and the next minute, forget about it. It was nighttime. So there I am, and the captain says, Sparks, I want you to go get another movie, because we had a movie for 3 months. It was called Andy Hardy's Double Trouble, and everybody was acting out Mickey Rooney's part and so on. So he said, these guys are going ape with this movie. You better go get, he says, take the dinghy and go get another movie. So there was a fellow from Philadelphia. His name was Joe Kearney, and he was a signalman. So Joe and I and a machinist mate from Kentucky, whose name I don't remember, but he was short and he was stout and he was very heavy. And he had this little 3-horse outboard motor and this tiny thing. It must have been 8 foot long if it was anything, this boat. And we get in it, and Joe is signaling, and everybody's saying, no, we saw that, we don't want that, you know, that. And all of a sudden, here comes the typhoon. And it's raining, and this guy's frantic, and the engine conks out, so he's pulling on the string, and he was so strong, he pulled so hard that the whole thing came off the transom, and down it went, because it was wet and slippery. Now we have nothing, no oars, no nothing. We're standing up to our knees in water, and my movie is lashed to the seat, you know, and I wasn't thinking about the movie, so I said, he signals to the last, we're being pushed out to sea. Leaving all the ships, and we're going out to sea. And I said, we got to do something. We better swim. And he says, I can't swim. So I said, what are you doing in the Navy? He said, I don't know. So then they signal, and this LST, it could have been yours, signals back saying, we can't lower a boat, but we'll throw over a Jacob's ladder, swim over. So what are we going to do? We tell this guy, lay on your back and float and kick. And we'll each take one arm and we'll swim. And we finally made it. And so they gave us dry clothes and a meal. And of course, they couldn't even let our ship know, because it was radio silence. You know, they were still fighting on the island, and we were out there in the bay. So the next morning, everything was calm. And they sent us back. And we come ashore, and everybody is clapping. Oh, gee whiz, they thought we were dead. And all of a sudden, electrician's mate, Pincus, down to the captain's cabin on the double. So I figure he's going to thank me for saving this guy. Comes in, he says, where's the movie? I said, what do you mean, where's the movie? The movie went down with the boat, Captain. And he said, look, that was your responsibility, Sparks. You better get a movie, or these guys are going to throw you overboard. So I said, can I go ashore? And he says, yes. I go ashore, and I said, what am I going to do? I just went ashore to get off the ship. So I get it, and I said, I see the electrical shack. And I said, oh, the electrical shack. Well, you know, I'm an electrician's mate. I got the thing. Maybe we'll do something together. So I walk in, and who's behind the counter? Sal Amico. And he jumps over the counter, and he hugs me. And he was a big guy, like 6'4". And he says, what are you doing here? I said, what am I doing here? It's a war, don't you remember? And he said, I said, what are you doing here? He said, this is what they do with me. He says, I was on Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima, and I'm here now because I don't go on ships. I'm sick. So I said, can you get me a movie, Sal? He says, for you, I'll do anything. He said, you got something to trade? I said, what do you want? He said, well, what do you got to trade? I said, well, I got cigarettes because I don't smoke. And every time they open, I was a wheeler dealer. Every time they opened the ship's door, I bought a carton of cigarettes. It was $1. 10 cents a pack. You remember? It was wings, 20 grand, you know, stuff like that. Virginia rounds. So I used to save them. I figured sometime I may trade in Japan, which I did. So I said, I got 8 cartons of cigarettes. He said, you have a white uniform? I said, yes, I have an extra white uniform. He said, get them, I'll get you a movie. So I go back to the ship, I get this stuff, I come back and I give it to him, and he says, you mind the store, I'll be right back. 15 minutes later, he's back and he says, here's your movie. I said, he said, I traded everything for the movie. I said, what's the name of the movie? There's nothing on it. He said, well, how do I know? Beggars can't be choosers. I take him, I say, Sal, I'll see you back in the Bronx, I hope. And I go back to the ship, and everybody's cheering. He's back with the movie. The captain says, you did good. Okay, start the movie. I start the movie, guess what the name is? Andy Hardy's Double Trouble. And I said, that's it, I'm dead meat. But they laughed, it was so funny. And the next day, Joe Kearney and I got in a raft, because we no longer had a boat. We got in a raft, and we signaled, and we traded it for a movie, The Maltese Falcon, with Humphrey Bogart, and they loved that. Everybody was walking around like this, you know. So when you talk about that kind of stuff, that really, you never forget those things. And then years later, when I became a lawyer, like in 1953, I'm doing a deal in New York, and I walk in to buy some chewing gum in a Hallmark card shop. You guessed it, who's behind the counter? Sal Amico. I mean, this is weird. And he jumps out and says, what are you doing here? I said, I'm working. What are you doing? He said, this is my store. And so then we saw each other many, many times, and it's just a great thing, just like they said, you know, but we didn't have, despite all those years, we really remembered each other. It was incredible, because I guess we went through a lot together. So you brought back that memory. As a matter of fact, one last memory was when I met my old shipmate, who's now gone, Cope. He said to me, do you remember the Tank Deck Star? I said, no, what was that? He said, that was your newspaper. You created it. I said, you know, Josh, I don't remember that. He said, well, I have the original issue. And he brings out this thing, and it says, Editor-in-Chief, Al Pincus, the Tank Deck Star, and on one side it says, all the news no other newspaper will print. And on the other side it says, today's weather, nice if it doesn't rain. And I said, that was me at 19, there's no question about it.
We still have a little bit of time. Let me tell you something that might be of real interest to you about Al Pincus. Last year, he organized the first Buckingham Cours d'Excellence car show, antique car show in Buckingham. It was a huge success. I went to it and I was amazed at all the almost mint quality classic and antique cars that were there. And it's being repeated this year. So September 4th of 2000, Sunday.
September 24th.
September 24th, I think that's what it was. It's to benefit land preservation, and they've been successful at raising money to prevent open lands from being converted to houses at the terrific rate that's happening around the area. And so as time comes by, keep that in mind. That's something that's well worth seeing if you have any slight interest in antique cars. This will be one of the best. Next, I need another story. Come up so we can all hear it. I can run a great show here if I get cooperation. Okay.
I have to share this story with you. I told you when we left Pearl Harbor, they had put us on LCIs. And of course it broke down and they sent us back to Pearl Harbor. Well, we had no electricity aboard. There's no way we could single Pearl Harbor. Now I know why Pearl Harbor was attacked. Nobody knew we were out there. Finally a ship came out and we somehow singled that ship and they singled into the base. Anyhow, the story I wanted to tell you is we got back into the base. Now, we're supposed to be home. Of course, obviously we weren't. 2 days went by. The skipper went ashore. Didn't see him again. 2 or 3 days went by. The executive officer disappeared. So there's another fellow and I that were off the LST 283. And I said, Scruggs, I said, look, we're supposed to be home. I said, let's go over to ADCOM FIDPAC and see what's happening. So we went over, and there was a lieutenant there, and we told him the story. He looked up the records, he says, yes, you're right. You are supposed to be home. He said, all right, look, hold on, I'm going to write a letter, and I want you to give this to your skipper. And I want an hour, in an hour's time, I want an answer. So we got this letter, and boy, we were walking back to the ship, we thought we were really hot stuff. And The engineering officer was the only officer aboard. He was the officer of the deck. So we handed him this letter. He opened it up. He looked down at us. He said, "How long have you fellas been in the Navy?" 3 years. You know, we're proud of that. He says, "And you haven't learned still that you don't go over your immediate officer's head. You guys are in trouble." We shrugged that off. So I guess about an hour later, Leffler and Scruggs report to the executive officer's cabin. So we went up there, and there's a little short, stubby guy, and he was drunk. He read us up and down. He says, "You know, fellas," he said, "I have 2 years to go in the Navy." He said, "I'm going to be out before you are." Well, you know, kind of worried us, but it didn't bother us too much. I said, "Look, I'm a gunner's mate." I said, we had orders to take all these guns down, pack them up, throw the ammunition over the side. I said, "You don't need a gunner's mate." I said, "So you can't touch me." He said, "Oh yeah." He says, "We can make you a boatswain." Well, then I started to worry. So anyhow, we left and we went into our sacks, and the guys were needling the heck out of us. We were worried now. Next morning, reveille. Everybody on the main deck in your whites. We got up there, skipper was there, the executive officer, all the officers were there. And after they took the roll call, they said, "Leffler and Scruggs, take 2 steps forward." I said, "Oh my God, they're going to shoot us right here." So we stepped forward, and the captain turned the meeting over to the executive officer. He apologized to us in front of the whole crew. He says, "In 20 minutes, have your gear together. There's going to be an LCM pull-up alongside. We're signing you to an LSD." That was the best ride we could have got back to the States. So we sweated that one out.
You know, each time we have a program, there's something somewhere that I forget. And I just remembered what I forgot, and that is the wooden jewel case that we're raffling off tonight is at my house. So I thought we could put it off until next time, but I think since we plan to raffle it off tonight, I've got the raffle cards that the envelopes that people have filled out since the last time we had a raffle, and we've got, I think, 85 of them here. Some of them have the same names on them because each month people continue to use them. But I'm going to shake them up in here, and we'd like to get somebody to get our speaker. Okay, where's Ray Lorah? Let you be the guy that will find out who's going to do it. Now, you probably don't know them. You haven't had a chance to look at them, so dig down and find one. Now, a few of them don't have names on them because some people put donations in and they don't put their name on it. And if they win, we'll get a second drawing.
That one?
That's one. That's 2.
Oh, no, okay, yeah.
That's one. This one is from Lynn Packman. Lynn Packman. P-A-K-M-A-N. If he's not here, he's got his phone number, so I can call him and tell him he won. That's the rule. No, I think the way we played it in the past is that whoever wins, wins. So we could make another drawing to find out who would have won if we had that. You wanted to find out if you won, maybe. Okay, that's good. I put together a list in the back, about 4 pages, I think, almost 4 pages. I've thought of things that we could do here to improve the program if we had more time and more people helping out to do things. And so I sat down and wrote them down, and I have several copies of it in the back near the door. I've got 6 topics. One of them is upgrading videotaping and sound equipment. I've been on that for some time. We're still using borrowed equipment from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, and it'd be nice if we had a good new digital videotape camera, video camera, and also improve the quality and quantity of the tapes that we've got. If we had good editing equipment, and it's becoming more and more readily available. The next item is, and I've mentioned this before, promoting the use of the tapes. The tapes are upstairs in the library for the first 15 lectures. I'm about that far behind in getting the rest of them up there. But then the speakers, a number of the speakers have indicated that they would be willing to, maybe even happy to, give the talk of their World War II experiences to other organizations, such as school groups or retirement groups and others. And it'd be nice if we had somebody that